Hey guys, a little reference video today. I had a viewer, Ravi, asked me if my brush here that I'm using for August, it's kind of a challenge where we use the same gear all month. So I'm using the same brush. He said, is your brush getting dry before you use it the next day? And that's a very valid question. He said that he lives in a part of the world where right now he's in his rainy season and his brush is usually not going to be able to be dry by the next day. And so, yeah, I understand that, and that happens sometimes. And my answer to him was that no, it probably deep in the knot, it probably is not getting 100% dry by the next day. And as I was formulating and talking and thinking about that, replying to him, I thought, you know what, let's make a reference video to talk about brush care and drying, specifically drying the brush, how to treat it after the shave, both in the short term and the long term. So here goes. I thought about it for a while, tried to come up with all the really important information. If there's other pieces where I feel like I've missed them, I'll add them down in the description. If I do realize later that I want to just replace it with a whole nother video or something like that, I'll put that in the description also. So, so here we go. I wrote down, I've got my little tablet down here with my notes. My brush, just to be simple, start with something pretty relevant. My own brush cleaning process after the shave is mainly just a rinse because we've just shaved with a lather. And so in a sense, we don't really need to clean the brush on a per use basis. And so my process is, here I'm done with the shave. I've got a wet brush here. Of course, give it a good rinse. We want to remove any of the lather or soap anywhere in the knot. With animal hair brushes, I think it's the alkalinity, the chemical nature of the soap is that it can eat away and weaken the animal hairs over time. And so what I do to give it a good rinse is I'll take a bowl, this is my lather bowl. I'll tilt it over because I don't need the whole thing to fill with water. I'll tilt it to the side, so part of it, I'll have water running into it, and I'll just kind of mix around, and then water will start flowing out, and so that way the lather, the soap that's clearing away can flow out, and then every once in a while I'll dump it all out to get a fresh batch, and that's just kind of my rinsing process to make sure that water gets all through the knot. You can do that until it runs clear. And then I will hold the knot kind of at a 90-degree angle down into the sink, and I'll flick it back and forth. I'll shake it. I'll give it a really vigorous shake so that the water just flies out, and that pretty much removes any standing water from inside the knot. And so when I do that, some people say not to sling the brush. Matter of fact, I was doing some research for this very video, and I saw a pretty prolific shaving influencer out there say not to sling the knot, and the reason was because it could make the knot become unglued, and that obviously is a problem. But to me, I don't worry about that because the shaking is very effective at getting the hair out of the knot, the water out, and the lather. It can bring it to the tips. If you do have a little bit of lather still left that you didn't realize was still in there, it'll sometimes make a little bit of whiteness show up, and you're like, oh, I need to keep rinsing. So that's a great result there of the shaking process. But if a knot is going to come loose because I'm shaking it, it's probably going to come loose at some point anyway because it was not properly adhered by the manufacturer or whoever did it. And they're so easy to replace, the knots. You just clean up the old glue off of the base of the knot. You clean it out of the socket of the handle. And I like to use silicone. It lasts pretty much forever, but it's not permanent like epoxy. I've got another video on how to glue up a shaving knot that's out there if you want to see that. But it's just so easy. General purpose silicone adhesive works great. Especially the marine grade works even better. It works just as well, maybe better. And it's so easy to re-glue that not becoming unglued is just not a concern of mine. Matter of fact, it's probably a good thing because now we've made it better by gluing it properly. After that slinging, I will take it to my towel back here, and here we'll just pick up a sample towel, and I will mainly just strop it up and down. Then I'll turn the brush a little bit and strop it up and down again, moving to drier places so that extra water can be removed. I don't do swirling motions. I don't want to tangle up the knot. That would be hard to do for a lot of badgers. That's mainly for horse knots. But I want to be gentle on the tips myself. And so just a more straight line motion with me turning it. When I come up, I might do a turn and then go back down, you know, that kind of thing. And that way I get a lot of coverage on the knot. And then at that point, there's just no standing water on the in the knot anywhere. And so you can just, you know, sit it on its base to let it dry. I will also spread the knot out just a little bit from the center, and that does cause it to expand just a little for more airflow, which is going to be a positive thing. I let it sit on its base to dry. Something very important, never put your knot in a small enclosed area, like under the sink, in a medicine cabinet, you know, that's on the wall. That is a poorly ventilated area, and that will help mold to grow and problems to develop. If you are in a humid area of the world, or because of various other things, perhaps you could put your brush in front of a fan, something like that. That might help it. So let's talk about why we need to clean our brushes. It's kind of an obvious question, but the answer will help us as we talk about other things. Obviously, general purpose cleaning, you know, stubble, things like that, oils that you might have on your face prior to the shave, different products in your lather. You want to just keep that from building up in your brush, and for a nice, long, healthy brush life. And that's one part of it, just kind of general purpose cleaning. And the other part, the other reason to clean your brushes, or strategy that you need to address when cleaning your brushes, is those hard water buildup, soap, mineral deposits, that sort of thing. If you have hard water, the soap scum buildup can happen as well. And both those cleaning strategies kind of require different products usually to address them, and we'll cover that a little bit. Now, in a situation right now with austere August, I use the same brush every day, like I said, and I don't think it's getting 100% dry, but I'm essentially cleaning it every day with a really well hydrated lather, which is what I usually use. Then even the core parts of the knot, that lather's getting in there, and if it's going to be preventing mold because of the very nature of the soap. And as long as I make sure to give it a really good rinse, then it's going to be hard for mold to develop, even if it's used every day. And in fact, the old guys from decades ago, you know, they'd use one brush every day and just wouldn't think twice, because that's what you had to do in many cases. And as long as you give it a really good rinse, then you're generally going to be fine. But what most people do is they'll have a multi-brush situation where you use a brush one day and then you let it sit for a day or two and use another brush while that one dries. So that's a very popular way to make sure that you do get a dry brush between uses. Is it absolutely essential? No. Probably preferred. Now let's move on to some just general rules about brushes and brush care and that sort of thing. We've already covered a couple, like one of the big ones, don't put it in a small area that doesn't have good ventilation. Travel tubes are a popular option when you're on the go. Make sure that it has holes in it. If it's a DIY travel tube, you can drill your own holes in there. Some of them that you purchase specifically for traveling from a vendor will have holes built in them already, but put some holes in there to allow for better ventilation. This is one of my favorite travel tubes, and AliExpress has these pretty cheap. There are some shaving vendors that will sell these for more price than you really should pay, but you know, it accomplishes any height brush, as you can see, and there are some of my bigger brushes that don't fit inside this diameter. This is a monster Thader brush, and it's, you know, it's not going to fit in there, but 95% of my brushes do fit in this container. And this one has one little hole in the top for ventilation. I probably at some point will drill more holes to help with that. Since this is kind of a double-sided, it doesn't really do too much help to drill holes in the sides here, because you'd have to do both sides, and I may very well do that. I may close it all the way and then drill straight through both layers. I sometimes don't like to put as many holes in the center up here, because that gives the hairs a little place to go and might get deformed or something like that. I usually put my holes around the outside, but that's just my own personal opinion. Now, throughout this video, if I don't say that it's my opinion, then it's something I've gathered from other shavers and my own experience, and it should be pretty reliable, right? But if it's something where I'm just making my best guess, I'll try to say that to you guys so that you can sort the information that you're receiving here. If you are a frequent traveler, you may want to switch to synthetic shave brushes. I don't really like synthetics, and so that's kind of a last resort for me, but many guys do like synthetics. I like the Motherlode knot. It's the most like a nice plush badger brush as any of the other synthetic knots, and so that would be my preference. But I will often switch to a small bore brush when I'm traveling, because they dry quicker, they rinse quicker. So for me, that's a good option. Oh yeah, here's another type of tube. I like this one because it's more clear. I actually like it because it's easier to tell what brush is inside. And this one has those holes that the manufacturer drilled more around the sides. But it's the same principle as the other one, with accommodating any length of brush. And this one has a horse brush inside. I don't have a problem taking a badger brush on a trip. If it's just a 1 or 2 week trip, then as long as, like I said before, I'm getting really good rinsing, then I know that it's going to not really develop any mold. And so then when I get back from my trip, I'll make sure I let it sit out. When you do arrive at your location, a hotel or whatever, then I would then take my brush out of its travel case, set it on the counter so that during the day it can dry more. Do you need a brush stand? And the answer is no. It is not required. When you find a brush set online, a lot of the makers, a lot of the people that inexpensive places want to put together a brush set for you is only because it looks like how people say it should look. It usually comes with a very tiny bowl, and they'll call it a lather bowl, which is really funny because it barely fits the brush. That's not good for lathering. About the only thing it's good for is maybe to take an old soap puck and to put it down in the bottom of that to load from, but not to generate a lather from. But then it'll include a razor stand. I don't have one nearby. I'm sorry, I said a razor stand, I meant brush. But they usually come in the type where it's got a fork and you stick the handle in the fork, and then it lets you hang your brush upside down. At first it might seem logical to let the water drip out, but if you use the technique or something like the technique I showed at the beginning of the video of slinging it and then the towel, then you're not going to have any standing water that gravity would affect. And so whether the brush is dried this way or sitting on its base, it's going to be the same. Matter of fact, years ago, some shavers did some actual testing where they got brushes wet and dried them upside down versus on their back, and it was the same either way. So we've got some scientific proof as well that it's not any faster. They do sometimes look nice. If you've got them on your counter, if you think that looks nice, then go ahead and use it, but just don't be under the impression that it's useful in the terms of helping your brush to dry. As a matter of fact, what it is going to do, especially the cheap ones, the cheap stainless steel ones, those little arms that your brush goes back and forth on, they're going to put little marks on the side of your nice brushes. And so that's a reason not to use them. But just set them on their back, on their end there, is just fine and kind of preferable, at least to me. When I am getting rid of a lot of the water out of a brush, some people will squeeze the knot. I always, if I do squeeze, it's very gently to just prevent the tips from being damaged or the fibers. But honestly, I rarely ever squeeze mine out. That's only my personal preference. If that's something that you want to do, feel free. But if I do, it's only gently at all, if at all. One of the big things that I consider a myth regarding brushes, shaving brushes, is that you should use conditioner on them. And this can even be spread and disseminated by, somewhat reputable shaving people. But, and the problem is it kind of is logical because they make the argument, well, it's animal hair, whether it be horse, boar, or badger. It's a natural hair. How do we take care of our natural hair? We use shampoo, use conditioner. That helps the hair, right? And so that makes sense. And so I think that's a reason why the myth has lasted so long. But it starts to fall apart when you realize that we're using the different types of hairs for different purpose. My human hair is just meant to look nice. It's not utilitarian. I'm not using it for any kind of brush. And so that's where things start to divide, the purposes. And so therefore the cleaning and the preserving of that hair needs to also divide, because especially in the case of a boar brush like this 1250 from Samog, its whole job is to make lather. And one of the biggest ways it does that is the hairs absorb lots of water, they get more flexible, and then they cause the soap to interact and mix and agitate, and wham, now you have lather when you started out with soap and water. But absorbing the water is a big part of its job. It's what it needs to do its job. And so when you bring in a conditioner with silicone products or silicone type products in it, they attach to the bristles and get in the way and inhibit that water absorption aspect of these hair bristles. And that's how it does its job. And so I've often seen people report how their boar brush really changed once they put conditioner on it. Doesn't work nearly as well. And so you can use other types of cleaners to get rid of that if you mistakenly put conditioner on your natural hair brushes. And I would advise you to do that. But just don't use conditioner in the first place, or shampoos that contain conditioner ingredients. Definitely plenty of those out there. It's trying to do double duty, and that's fine for human hair. But my belief is, and there are a bunch of shavers out there who agree with me, a couple of good forum posts that have made out there regarding multiple reasons why you shouldn't use a conditioner, some at the chemical level with the way that it affects the pH of everything, but I'm not going to get into that. It gets in the way of either a horse or a badger or a boar brush with absorbing water, and that's what it needs to do its job to make a lather that's better for you, and a bigger lather, that sort of thing. So don't use conditioner on it or shampoos that have conditioner, because these are utilitarian items that we need to do a function, unlike human hair. So don't treat it like human hair regarding conditioner, is my advice. Some people might disagree, and that's okay, but You can investigate it more with more research if you feel like it. If you use a wetter, slicker lather like I prefer, then it's easier to rinse out. And so that is going to be better. Quicker, quicker to dry and rinse and that sort of thing. If you use a thicker, drier lather, that's okay if that's your preference, but it also means you may need to spend more time rinsing your knots. Like this Semogue, a smaller brush is going to be better at drying more quickly. That's kind of logical, right? So if you're traveling, that's why I personally sometimes take a small bore brush when I'm traveling. When you have this works with bore brushes when they dry, but also with badgers that have been treated with a bleaching agent to make the tips softer. After the shave, after the next day, they will clump together sometimes. And I usually try not to bother those too much. I don't split them up with my hands. I'll run some water the next day before I then try to squeeze that knot into like a soaking cup or something like that. But because I want to treat those tips very carefully so they last a very long time. So that's my personal view on those crispy tips that sometimes develop the next day. I'm gentle with those. I don't want to cause any breakage. So let's talk about long-term maintenance. And now we get to where I was talking about those two different types of cleaning, goals of cleaning. We got the general purpose, and we've got the removing hard water, soap scum, that sort of thing. It's two different sides. For how often, I will do it maybe every 100 or 200 uses. That's my personal preference. Zingari Man makes a brush cleaner. It looks like, and of course it's in the same container as their shaving soap, but you should not shave with it. It's not meant to lather. It is a higher strength soap that it's supposed to just clear away and clean and not provide like skin benefits because it's not for your skin. And so it's just a puck in there. This one hasn't been used in a while, and so it's just a hard puck. The Declaration Grooming made one for a very long time. I think a company named Red Panda that they put out one for a while. I don't know if they're still in production. Williams Soap was actually told to me it was a great brush cleaner, general purpose brush cleaner, because it didn't have a lot of oils and things to try to take care of your skin. It was a very focused soap that had strong soap cleaning features that made it a good brush cleaning soap. That's been discontinued now, but for anybody who has Williams pucks sitting around, that's a very good soap cleaning option, and it's much cheaper. Back when it was available in grocery stores for like $1, it's much cheaper than a brush cleaning soap. You can also find at beauty stores like Ulta and those other beauty stores that crop up around a soap probably similar to this kind, and it's made for cleaning their cosmetics brushes that beauticians might use, and so that's available as well. I know that's on Amazon. I think one of the brand names out there is Da Vinci. The reason I put the Dawn in the profile, the pic, was because this is a good general purpose soap. You can take and get your brush really wet, put a couple of drops of Dawn on there, work it in. You can also work up a lather inside of a bowl with Dawn, and that's a very, very good deep, general purpose cleaning operation for your brushes. Now, if you do have hard water, then you'll definitely want to do some type of soak to address the deposits and the soap scum, that sort of thing. A vinegar soak is great for that, and I personally recommend about a 1:5, 1:6 ratio of vinegar to water, and probably about a 12 to 15 minute soak for that. I have seen ratios of 50-50 water and vinegar with just a few minutes of soaking. I personally am guessing that that's a little too harsh. I've also seen a 1:9 ratio, 1:10 ratio with maybe half an hour of soaking. That's an option. You can do your own research specifically if you're curious about that. I personally, like I said, about a 1 to 5, 1 to 6 ratio of vinegar to water, and then about a 15-minute soak is what I do about every 1 or 200 uses. In my early days, I purchased some badger knots from some 3-band silver tip badger knots from Whip Dog. Very happy with those knots. They've lasted very well over the years, very soft and plush. And he sent along a small packet of oxi-clean, maybe about a teaspoon of oxi-clean, and he recommended taking and putting it in a cup and filling that up with water, soaking for a few minutes, like 5 minutes, then taking it out, giving it a really good rinse, and then soaking it again, and repeating that 2 more times. And that was mainly to get that natural badger funk smell away, but it's also good for general cleaning. I don't really know if oxi-clean is good for the hard water deposits and things like that, though. You can probably check that out online. But using that, I never had any issues with the animal funky smell. Online also, I see that borax can be used in a similar way like oxi-clean. I don't know which type of cleaning it's really, specifically geared for, but it looks like maybe about a teaspoon of borax mixed with about a cup of water with a 10-minute soak might be what I see recommended the most online. And so if you have that on hand, do some more research yourself and figure out if you like to use that and what type of cleaning that would address. That may be very good. I wouldn't be surprised if that was good at both types of cleaning, especially the hard water stuff. So that's pretty much it for the cleaning types. Humidity, if you have air conditioning, obviously, you don't really deal with humidity too much, and the brush is probably going to dry almost all the way by the next day. If you're in an area where you just have a very humid climate, maybe you don't have access to air conditioning, then yes, it can take days for a brush to dry. And so maybe these thick, luxurious types of knots are kind of a pipe dream for you, that just not practical because of how long it takes them to dry. And so then these are great brushes. These smaller, I think 21 millimeter is sometimes what these are, sometimes 18. If I had to use these types of brushes, smaller, I've even got a 22 millimeter silver tip, super happy with. I was really happy with. You're still going to get a great experience, and these are going to take less time to dry. But that kind of person, like I said, with maybe putting those brushes in front of a fan to help things might be nice. But also you may have to just buy a few, and these guys are cheap. These Semogue brushes work great. They're really luxuriously soft once the tips have been broken in and split, and so they feel luxurious, and they're just not very expensive at all. Highly recommend those. The Omegas are pretty good, but for me, they take so long to break in and they take a long time to get comfortable that I don't like those as much. It's just my personal opinion. Zenith bore knots are also very nice. Similar to Semogue, they get comfortable in just several uses, but it can take a while to get those tips to split, but they're still comfortable while it's happening, and so I like Zenith and Semogue the most. And lastly, especially if you buy inexpensive brushes like this, our forefathers, decades ago of shaving, I've seen places where they had an old shaving mug. I thought I had one around here somewhere. They've got an old shaving mug, and they just let the brush rest inside the shaving mug on top of the soap. And we, in our desire to keep the bristles as healthy as possible, would cringe at that, contacting the soap the whole time. But they were focused on practicality. And then also, if the brushes were so cheap, maybe they bought a new one every couple years when finally the bristles would kind of die out because of all that soap interaction and storage. But I've seen so many older brushes with bought off eBay with curved bristles because they were just set in a mug for years and years, being unused. And so, in a sense, a lot of what we're doing with shaving brushes could be thought of as just frivolous, but especially when we have brushes that are a little more expensive, we want to keep them going as long as we can. And so I think it's okay to be a little particular about how we treat them. But there are definitely guys who just didn't care too much, just maybe give it a good rinse at the end of the shave, and you're good to go. So if you're a practical shaver, especially if you use cheap brushes, then you can choose whether you want to be particular about it or not. And that, I believe, is everything I had notes on to cover. And so I hope this helps you guys with your brush knowledge. A lot of the principles about animal hair brushes are going to apply to the boar, the horse, and the badger. But because especially the issues with the conditioner, it especially applies the most to the boar brushes because they absorb water a lot more than the other two kinds. With the synthetic, it doesn't absorb water, and so if you want to put conditioner on your synthetic brush, it's not going to make a difference. It's already a synthetic fiber anyway, but I don't think most people would put conditioner on a synthetic anyway because you're not conditioning anything. But I would definitely advise not to put conditioner on a natural hair brush. So there we go, Ravi. I hope that addresses your specific question about using a brush every day, whether it dries all the way, maybe some ideas on helping it to dry. But then, of course, I expanded out to cover a lot of different topics about a lot of different aspects about brush care. Like I talked about, the badger brushes that are 2 bands, and we know that because this, you kind of see 3 bands here, but that's because it's lofted high, which is my own preference for these 2-band knots. Normally you might not see that 3rd band right there, but it's a thick band, and so we know it's a 2-band. And the people like this because of the higher backbone, but that also means more firm tips. And so what they do is they put a bleaching agent across the tips, let it sit for a certain amount of time, and then they rinse it off. And that weakens the tips, softens it up to where it can give a more plush face feel when that knot is wet. And so that's a very popular thing for the manufacturers and not manufacturers to do to create those brushes. And so be careful with your tips because they have, in a sense, been damaged by that bleaching. Technically, it's a damage. So just be careful with those tips. Treat them, especially when they're dry. I would advise you to treat them carefully. Get them wet before you really start messing with them, you know, and that maybe will help keep those tips lasting as long as possible. Technically, a brush with those treated tips is not going to last as long as a brush with untreated tips. Since you are weakening them, eventually those tips might break off after years and years of use. But I think that's going to be a very long time. And so maybe, especially if you have a few brushes in rotation, it would be a long time before you were to see that degradation. In fact, even if you were to take a badger brush and use it, if you were to take one badger brush, like a finest badger like this one, a 2-band, and even if it had untreated tips, maybe they were very firm, if you were to use it daily, then after years of use, they would naturally, those tips would gradually, minutely by amounts, soften up and gel over time. And they would have that soft feel. And so what people started doing was using those bleaching agents to accelerate that process. But it does happen naturally. I think that's kind of interesting. But yeah, treat those gelled tips a little more nicely since they are slightly damaged. But there we go. Oh, and that's another reason why I don't use pre-shaved oils, is because I don't want those oils to be on my skin, extra oils, to then build up as deposits and to make my brush more dirty. Another reason why I don't use those oils. And they also slow down my razor a little bit, and I want a fast, smooth shave instead of something that slows it down and gets gunk on my brush. So I avoid the shaving oils for that reason, but that's my personal belief. There we go. This is Sugar Daddy Shaves. I hope that this has been a good reference video for you guys. Any updates to this information I will put down in the description. Thanks for watching. Good night.